2.12 Unit Test Development of Theme Part 1. Passage 1. Bulgogi. Can you chop the scallions? Xiao Jun didn't look away from his smartphone to reply to his mother's request. He was busy texting Vince Cordova about a new show they were planning to binge-watch Friday night. Xiao! What? What do you mean, what? I needed to chop the scallions. It was 11:30 a.m. and the town pavilion, the office building, Ji-suk's food truck Bulgogi was parked outside of, was about to unleash a stampede of customers. I have to get this beef marinating, otherwise in a half hour I'm going to lose a bunch of hungry tax consultants to the chicken and waffle guys across the street. Xiao Jun smiled, but Ji-suk couldn't see his eyes from under his royal blue cap. Then she realized he was still looking at his phone, which he was concealing below his knees as his fingers tapped the screen. Hey! She threw a kitchen towel at him, and it unfurled in midair and landed on his head, draping itself over the brim of his cap. Okay, I'll do it. Ji-suk had made a name for herself in Kansas City, especially after a local magazine wrote a big cover story when she left her job as an attorney at a law firm after 7 years to start a food truck business. If her own mother had still been alive, she would have been quite upset with Ji-suk for that. Her mother had spent years learning to speak relatively good English, and she'd been determined to make sure Ji-suk graduated from a respectable college and became a lawyer. Even though she'd made Ji-suk take Korean lessons every Saturday morning followed by violin lessons in the afternoon, and cook kimchi and other Korean delicacies with her at least once a week, Ji-suk's mother had wanted her to succeed by American standards. And she had. She'd become a lawyer just like her mother wanted, but she'd also learned to love burnt end barbecue, a local culinary favorite. She was an avid fan of the Kansas City Chiefs. She even loved playing softball. She had a wickedly fast windmill pitch, having played throughout college and graduate school and on the law firm's recreational team. Ji-suk had succeeded by American standards in ways her mother couldn't have imagined, and in ways her mother probably didn't want. But Ji-suk couldn't do anything about that. She was American, just as much as she was Korean, and even though her mother wouldn't have wanted her to do it, starting the food truck was Ji-suk's way of honoring her mother and showing that she valued what her mother had taught her. Still, she was determined not to force Xiao Jun to do the things her mother had forced her to do. He wouldn't have to take violin lessons, nor would he have to learn Korean. She was more than willing to let him take Korean lessons if he showed any interest, but he never did. She wasn't sure, however, whether she was doing the right thing, as Xiao Jun didn't seem to want to play sports, nor did he have any serious hobbies. He got by in school, but he didn't apply himself. He was mostly interested in his friends. She hadn't been any different at this age, and she would have spent most of her time with her friends too, but her mother would never have allowed it. Xiao Jun finished chopping a stalk of scallions and put down his knife in order to glance at his phone. Hey, Mom, Vince has to do something with his family on Friday night. He asked if we can hang out right now. Would it be okay if I headed over there now? Sure. He tried to read his mother's face, but she just carried on marinating the meat. He grabbed his backpack and threw it over one of his shoulders. Then he headed out the backup door of the truck. He looked back at her serving her first guest. She was smiling, but it was a distant smile. Without saying a word, he climbed back into the food truck. Ji-suk glanced over, but still didn't say a word. He picked up his knife and handful of scallions and started chopping. Question 1. Which detail does the author include to demonstrate the theme that Ji-suk has been very successful on her own terms? Ji-suk graduated from a good college and became a lawyer. Ji-suk loved to play softball and had a fast windmill pitch. Ji-suk appeared in an article in a local magazine. Question 2. Which statement best demonstrates a main theme in this text? Ji-suk's mother loved her daughter, and she was determined for Ji-suk to be successful in any culture. Ji-suk had often disappointed her mother, and Ji-suk wondered if her mother would still be disappointed in her. Ji-suk's mother wanted her to retain her Korean culture, so Ji-suk ate Korean food and learned the language. Question 3. Which statement from the text best develops the theme of embracing both traditional and cultural influences? She'd become a lawyer just like her mother wanted, but she'd also learned to love burnt end barbecue, a local culinary favorite. He wouldn't have to take violin lessons, nor would he have to learn Korean. She was an avid fan of the Kansas City Chiefs. Question 4. Which sentence from the text best demonstrates how Xiao Jun's actions developed the theme of the importance of holding on to cultural traditions? Then he headed out the back door of the truck. Xiao Jun finished chopping a stalk of scallions and put down his knife in order to glance at his phone. Without saying a word, he climbed back into the food truck. Passage 2. Out of place. Ben bunu yap maya kamgam. I will not do that. He can't have my shoes. He stole my guitar. Erkin's eyes looked impudent beneath his dark brow as his cheeks reddened in fury. His gray whiskered lips trembled as his hand gripped tightly around the nurse's wrist. The nurse carefully but firmly freed himself from Erkin's grasp. He then turned to the caregiver who was assisting him, smiled and said calmly, "Go get Michelle." Michelle was scanning boxes of gauze bandages and stacking them onto a shelf in the storeroom when the caregiver came in and announced, "Philip's trying to get Erkin to take a shower and he needs your help." Michelle rushed out of the store and down the hall to Erkin's room. This was the last week of Michelle's internship. It was her junior year, and the internship was part of her workplace and consumer education class. At first, she wanted to intern at her dad's gas station, but her teacher told her she needed to branch out and sign Michelle up at the Oak Court nursing home, only 15 minutes away from her house. Wearing a Pittsburgh Steelers sweatshirt and jeans, with dark curls pushed back in a hair clip, Michelle stood out from the crowd of nurses and caregivers in white pants and polo shirts who were standing huddled in the doorway of Erkin's room. She moved past them and rushed to Erkin's side. As soon as he saw her, Erkin's face brightened, and he stopped looking like a stricken animal and instead looked like someone who recognized a dear old friend. "He can't have Michelle. I sold them at the corner," Erkin shouted, pushing his way to Michelle. "He stole my guitar," he whispered. "I know, Erkin, but he was only trying to help you get some money to pay for your trip." Michelle had been frightened by a lot of the residents of the nursing home when she first started the beginning of the semester. Many of them were incoherent and loud, and some could be very aggressive and scary. Erkin often pushed or kicked and ranted. Michelle had started to regret this internship, and she even avoided going near Erkin's room whenever possible. "He lives in his own world, Philip," the managing nurse explained to Michelle after his first encounter with Erkin's temper. Still, Michelle had been curious, and she felt sorry that Erkin had a bad reputation among the staff. She too had felt like everyone mistrusted her, especially at the nursing home, where she was so much younger than the rest of the staff, so she understood how he must feel. Besides, he was the only person in the whole place with skin nearly as dark as hers. Over time, she noticed patterns in Erkin's rants. She would sometimes mention his guitar and his father and the city of Diyarbakir, which she learned is in Turkey. So she decided that the next time she brought supplies to his room, instead of avoiding Erkin, she would play along with whatever he said. If he lived in his own world, then she would try to join him there. Bit by bit, she discovered and he had immigrated to the United States from Turkey, and when he was very young. His father had saved as much money as possible to pay for his journey, but he needed to sell Erkin's guitar to help cover the cost. Erkin had moved in with his aunt's family in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and finished school there. Eventually, he got married and had children of his own and worked for years signing Turkish singers to a small record label. But he'd never quite felt at home in the United States. "I know he sold your guitar, but you told me yourself he just wants what's best for you," Michelle said, while Philip and the caregiver looked on in amazement as Erkin settled into an armchair. "Now, why don't you listen to Philip? Take your shoes off and have a shower." "For you, Michelle, I'll do it." You can feel out of place in the country, in the place where you live, or even in your own head, Michelle thought. But if you're lucky, someone will know how to find you and remind you that we all feel that way sometimes. Question 5. A theme in the story is that sometimes people are not always what they appear to be. Which statement develops this theme? Michelle wears a football jersey and jeans to her internship at a nursing home. Erkin immigrated to the United States and grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Erkin brightens into a smile when Michelle enters his room. Question 6. Which sentence develops the idea that Michelle is learning to understand how other people feel? At first, she wanted to intern at her dad's gas station, but her teacher told her she needed to branch out and sign Michelle up at the Oak Court nursing home only 15 minutes away from her house. Still, Michelle had been curious, and she felt sorry that Erkin had a bad reputation among the staff. So she decided that the next time she brought supplies to his room, instead of avoiding Erkin, she would play along with whatever he said. Question 7. Early in the passage, Erkin is shouting at the nurse and caregiver. Which sentence demonstrates that Erkin is still connected to reality in spite of his ranting? I sold them at the corner. He can't have my shoes. He stole my guitar. For you, Michelle, I'll do it. Question 8. Select the sentence that best develops the theme about the importance of having compassion for others. Bit by bit, she discovered that he had immigrated to the United States from Turkey when he was very young. She, too, had felt like everyone mistrusted her, especially at the nursing home, where she was so much younger than the rest of the staff, so she understood how he must feel. Besides, he was the only person in the whole place with skin nearly as dark as hers. Question 9. Read the sentence from paragraph 3. At first, she wanted to intern at her dad's gas station, but her teacher told her she needed to branch out and signed Michelle up at the Oak Court nursing home only 15 minutes away from her house. Which definition of branch is used in the sentence? The part of a tree that grows out of the trunk. A part that extends from something larger to expand one's interests. Passage 3. The price isn't always right. How much are you willing to pay for a pair of athletic shoes, a new phone, or the latest video game? We all make decisions about spending, and the companies that sell us products often follow that we, as consumers, tell them. If we think the price for an item is too high, we won't purchase it, and the price will probably come down. If one company can sell products for a lower price than others, then they all have to sell their products for a lower price to stay competitive. Prices can also change from one place to another. Imagine that you are on vacation in New York City from Cincinnati, Ohio. If you want to buy a bottle of water while strolling through Central Park, you may be in for a shock. The same brand of bottled water you buy at home may cost twice as much in New York City. Travel to another country and the difference in price can be even greater. Go to a store in Germany to buy a garden hose and you'll still realize you're not at a hardware store in Kansas. In Germany, each part is sold separately. You'll have to select from a set of hoses, each more or less expensive, with the difference in price based on factors such as how thick or long or sturdy the hose is. And you'll have to pay extra for parts like the nozzle that screws into the hose. Once you've found all the parts you need, you could end up spending up to $65 and $120 for your new garden hose. If you go to a store in the United States to buy a garden hose, the prices will also vary, but the parts will probably come attached. There will still be a wide price range, but all the prices, from the cheapest to the most expensive, will be much lower. You'll probably spend between $10 and $40. What accounts for the difference? Two of the biggest factors are sales taxes versus value-added taxes and perceived value. In the United States, states need to take money to help pay for the service they provide, so they charge taxes on items sold. This is called sales tax and is usually between 7% of the original cost. If the sales tax is 7% and a garden hose costs $10, then you will pay $10.70 for the hose. One of Germany's fiscal policies is to collect taxes in many stages during the production of items. This is called value-added tax. The makers of raw materials such as rubber sell their materials to the hose manufacturers, and they pay 19% of what they make to the government. Hose manufacturers sell their items to retail shops like hardware stores. They also pay 19% of what they make to the government, minus the taxes the raw material makers have already paid. The retail store sells the hoses to people like you, and they pay 19% of the government minus the taxes the raw material makers and manufacturers have already paid. These extra costs to businesses get passed along to the consumer in the form of higher prices. Even with tax costs, however, sometimes the difference in prices between two places is hard to explain. It fluctuates slightly, but the price a store in Germany asks for garden hose is probably higher than the price a store in the United States asks. The price a consumer is willing to pay for a garden hose, its perceived value, is a lot higher in Germany than the United States. People in Germany just think a garden hose is worth more than do people in the United States. Most consumers look for the best quality items for the lowest possible price. The price they're willing to pay is influenced by many factors, such as how they earn at work, how much they need the items, and how much they pay for necessities such as food, clothing, and housing. These factors change so much from one place to another that it's no wonder prices vary too. The price variance could soon be changing, however. As more people gain internet access, they're researching item prices in other countries. Slowly but surely, the demand for cheaper garden hoses is spreading throughout Germany, and the phrase getting hosed no longer has two meanings. Question 10. Which statement about value-added taxes best develops the central idea of this text? They are set at specific rate. They are added on the cost of items sold. They include taxes paid by the manufacturer. Question 11. Which sentence from the passage develops the idea that prices vary over time as well as from place to place? As more people gain internet access, they're researching item prices in other countries. People in Germany just think a garden hose is worth more than people in the United States. The same brand of bottled water you buy at home may cost twice as much as in New York City. Question 12. Which phrase best explains what a fiscal policy is based on its use in this sentence from paragraph 6? One of Germany's fiscal policies is to collect taxes in many stages during the production of items. A policy related to money and finances, a policy for companies and corporations rather than individuals, a policy about large populations for local and national citizens. Question 13. Which definition of fluctuates best describes what a price that fluctuates does as the word is used in paragraph 7? Decreases, changes, remains. Question 14. Which detail best supports the idea that people have varying opinions about how valuable a product is? Systems for collecting taxes vary according to where people live. The consumer's willingness to pay a certain price for a given item affects how the retailer sets the price. Value-added taxes collected from manufacturers, retailers, and consumers. Question 7. Which evidence best supports the idea that people have varying opinions about how valuable a product is? We all make decisions about spending, and the companies that sell us products often follow what we as consumers tell them. Prices also change from one place to another. One of Germany's fiscal policies is to collect taxes in many stages during the production of items. Excerpt from August Heat by W.F. Harvey. Passage number 4. I found myself standing before a gate that led into a yard bordered by a strip of thirsty earth, where there were flowers, purple stock, and scarlet geranium. Above the entrance was a board with the inscription, Chase Atkinson, Monumental Mason, Workers in English and Italian Marble. From the yard itself steamed a cheery whistle, the noise of hammer blows and the cold sound of steel meeting stone. A sudden impulse made me enter. A man was sitting his back towards me, busy at work on a slab of curiously veined marble. He turned around as he heard my steps, and I stopped short. It was a man I had been drawing, whose portrait lay in my pocket. He sat there, huge and elephantine, the sweat pouring from his scalp, which he wiped with a red silk handkerchief. But though the face was the same, the expression was absolutely different. He greeted me smiling, as if we were old friends, and shook my hand. Question 16. How does Mr. Atkinson develop over the course of the story? He is content with himself and his appearance until he sees the picture James drew of him and becomes self-conscious. He is talkative stonemason who takes pride in his work but remains silent as he struggles to repair a table leg. He is friendly and kind to James but transforms into a menacing man, sharpening his chisel in his stifling hot attic. Question 17. Read these paragraphs from the story. For some time I sat in silence. Then a cold shudder ran down my spine. I asked him where he had seen the name. Oh, I didn't see it anywhere, replied Mr. Atkinson. I wanted some name, and I put down the first that came into my head. Why do you want to know? It's a strange coincidence, but it happens to be mine. What does James's interaction with Mr. Atkinson in this scene reveal about James? James is unsure of Mr. Atkinson's intent and feels wary of the man. James is unnerved to think that something abnormal has taken place. James is amused by the fact that his name is used as a sample headstone. Question 18. Would you like some completion points for taking this test? Yes.